This is Mxnzplain. My name is Lebo and Kabelo.
I'm Kabelo, and the two of us decided to begin this journey of just creating spaces for men to reflect on what it means to be a man in the 21st century. Our task is really to journey with men, listen to different stories, but to create an environment where we can all just learn and grow with each other. It's a journey.
Yep. So if you're interested in mansplaining about their spirituality, their traumas, and all things important about being a man in the 21st century, it's the place for you to come to.
Mxnzplain is for me, for you, it's for all of us. So join in and be part of our journey.
Welcome to Mxnzplain. My name is Lebo and Kabelo. As my dear friend Kabelo always says, this is a show for you, a show for us, a show for all men, for us to engage and speak about whatever issues plague us the most as young black men. I'm with my friend Kabelo.
And yeah, welcome to Mxnzplain. So today we have a very special guest with us, a friend, a colleague, but a very interesting human. And you'll see it and you'll figure it out as you hear this individual speak. But I think the conversation today really is about masculinity and spirituality. And we're really wanting to figure out what is the intersectionality between these two spaces and how do they influence the type of men that show up in society. So without wasting your time, we would like to welcome Anele Siswana, who is a clinical psychologist, celebrity psychologist. But the most important thing about this human being, I think for me, is his spirituality. And I think a part of me is more keen to hear more about that. But yeah, Togoza.
In Xhosa, we say
You did teach me this. I apologize. Yeah. You know, we generalize these things and sometimes we must unlearn, right? Okay, but nonetheless, Kamaku. Welcome to Mxnzplain.
Great.
And yeah, we look forward to just chatting with you. And I'm just going to jump into it, right? And you know, the conversation really is spirituality and masculinity. I don't want to go too deep. When you hear these two words, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Yeah, maybe it's ideal to give you kind of not an extensive understanding about who am I. I mean, you touched briefly. So I am Xhosa, number one. Come from Kwapat, the other side of Eastern Cape, which has a really deep history around people that fled from different places, but I come from a lineage of Amabata, and there's a lineage of Ushaga, but mostly Wazulu. But we are the descendants of Uzulu Matsigan, and which is a long historical thing. And I raise that because it speaks to my identity as a black man or Mxhosa who has that deep, rich history, which has contributed so much into the other aspect of who am I as a healer.
Right.
So I come from a lineage of Amagqirha wa Xhosa, and this is where it comes with so much distinctiveness that we don't have Izangoma wa Xhosa. We have Amagqirha.
Okay.
And my construct of them, they are divine healers, less traditional healers. It's a story for another day. So I come from that lineage. And I always say to people, the reason why I love Xhosa, the brand, my great-grandmother, who was a healer, was Noma Xhosa.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that's the whole part of that. But I always say to people, I happen to be a psychologist. I never thought a typical rural Xhosa boy who grew up at Pidoflalini, then grew up in PE in Gqeberha, and then went to KwaZakela High School. So everything has just been there. So you can imagine how a KwaZakela High School boy gets to meet psychology. In fact, psychology found me. Because I didn't even have the marks for it. I was 5 points below to get in psychology. So first idea was, okay, psychology, I don't even know what this thing is, but I have an idea of it. Second option was nursing, I don't know. Or the idea around nursing was, it was so rough. So I wanted a quick course that will get me through the working class system so that I can be able to help Lynn. But she made and so I like, nah, it's not gonna work, and blood is not gonna work.
Right.
And my other option was theology.
Okay.
I was so ready to go to UKZ and not the church way. Like, I am such a rebel that it's not gonna work.
What, the church round?
The church round.
Yeah.
I'm gay. At that time, I'm Lugi.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna be married to a woman, so it's not gonna
just
work.
For the sake of
it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
And I was told there's no salary, there's a stipend. It's not gonna work. Then I had PR as well, but like, there's a big thing in the community about the diploma and the degree.
Yeah.
Like, but PR, I have to do a national diploma in PR and events. It doesn't have that BA, BA and all of that, and I dropped that for some God's miracle, and then I found myself accepted.
Nice.
I had to write a supplementary test for that on general knowledge.
Yeah.
The day KB and Lebo, when I got my student card, I had it my whole day. It was a big moment for this boy from Wazakele, who's now at university to do his BA. Yeah. I made sure I choose a course, BA. And then that's how my journey began. Nice. As a psychologist. And obviously by then I had been to Ndabeni.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I went after my matric. Even that experience with Ndabeni, it was a very interesting one, because I had this question. Knowing that I'm queer, at that time I knew that I was gay. Am I somehow going to change and be this
and become a man?
Because there's also a thing there in Ndabeni. Once you've successfully completed the process, you have to test your Mercedes-Benz if it's working. And already there's a heterosexual ideology that you must find a chick that you're going to do this thing with. And it must be anything. And for me, like, how am I going to even start? Because I don't even like this other part of my life. So I'm like, okay, fine, maybe I'll change after that. I'm like,
so sorry to disturb you. So going in, when you were going in with this thought, your decision to go, had you made peace with the fact that you might want to change, or you might have to change?
Actually, that part, when I think about it, at the time, contextually, I didn't have the language, the capital that I possess now to locate things the way I'm able to collocate them. But it was a very instrumental time. And remember, because everything was tied to each other, I'm in the Eastern Cape University with my friends from high school. Everyone at that time is going to Ndabeni.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be left out.
Right.
Okay.
So there was a big part about belonging.
Right.
But my queerness was not much of a question because my friends already knew that part.
Right.
So it wasn't a big thing for a discussion or something to think about. But it was more of a belonging thing, because you knew if you don't go, you won't be part of conversation. There will be kind of seclusion. And at the initiation school, there was an element of ticking the box and be out of this thing, because you would then belong.
Yeah.
And that's it. Then when I reflected deeper into my master's, I then did my dissertation on the psychological understanding of Ololuwa, and I realized actually there were some psychological things I was trying to reconcile at that time, but context determined that I should just do this thing so that there are no questions. And you will do things the right way. So that's a part of me. So queer, Ndabeni, I come from a lineage of healers, and now I'm a healer. That's on its own. It's a journey. The journey as a psychologist has been a very interesting one, and having trained in a white dominant university roads.
Yeah.
For a rural boy who happens to be in this university where everything is English.
Yeah.
So I always say I had a culture shock.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was such a thing.
Yeah.
And I had to quickly get in on the ball, because I realized if I don't assimilate, I will lose a lot of benefits. So let me play into it. But I never fully achieved that state of assimilation because I have a lot of questions. And for the first time, I confronted race. For the first time, I realized, actually, I have some racial biases, and training in this university, I only need it for social capital and for survival in the world.
So I want to get into that, right? Specifically that statement that you just highlighted now, for survival in the world, right? So when it comes to how you understand your masculinity, right? Because I think, sometimes there's a misconception that queer men, compromise or reduce their masculinity to an extent. And I think for me, it's something that I've always wanted clarity on, right? In terms of defining your masculinity, right? One, as a boy who is Xhosa, and you had been in Ndabeni, right? And now you are transitioning from that to this psychologist being trained in a very white Western dominant type space. How did that impact and influence your understanding of what being a man means or looks like for you? And how did that show up in your journey?
Yeah, earlier you asked me about what comes into my mind when masculinity comes. Even the word masculinity, I first heard it in my master's, can you believe it? The only word I knew. And in fact, I always laugh about this. I remember when they were correcting my proposal, I used to write men as an MEN.
Yes.
Because that's how I've always understood it. Actually, I was introduced to the theory, hegemonic masculinity.
Yeah.
What is that? So already, I realized I've got a lot of deficits that come from my background and all of that. But then I got introduced to this world of masculinities. Then I read the work of Professor Kopano Ratele, the work of many African scholars who write about this construct of masculinity. Then I got tools then of interrogating what exactly it means to be a man.
Okay.
And remember, my orientation of manhood has always been through Ulalugu Wakos.
Yes.
So for me, being a man from as early as a young boy, there comes a time that is instrumental in your life. When you are 18 or 19, you will have to then go to Ndabeni. That was my marker of masculinity, that I'll only be a full man only when I have to go through this. Did it. And then I had an understanding, okay, now I have a theory to locate my experience of what this actually meant. So for me, being a man meant you are initiated, your penis is cut the right way. We have a construct in Xhosa. We've got indoda kanesi and indoda Xhosa. So there was no way I can be indoda kanesi because...
Indoda kanesi means what?
Sorry?
What does that mean?
Indoda kanesi, a man is not a man.
Was not a man.
Okay.
If you...
so the ones who get snipped in the hospital.
Tan Golozana's book captures this construct very well. So, you're a man, but you're not a man enough. Because you did not have to go through being circumcised, experience the pain that comes with it, because pain through initiation is very big.
Sure.
Because that's when you negotiate resilience and all kind of things. So, for me, that's how I understood what it means to be a man. So you must man up, and I ticked that box. So in my view, I was already a man. Then get to university. You are confronted with class. You are confronted with race. You are confronted with intersections. And these intersections was for me, I started asking, what does it mean for me as a Xhosa man who happens to be gay means to be a man? That's when I started interrogating that. What does it mean to be a Xhosa man where hegemonic masculinity says to you, to be a complete man, you must have money, you must have power, you must have control, and somewhat sexual prowess, that this thing as a man. And I'm like, I don't have any history of having played women in my life. So what exactly am I, right? I didn't test my Mercedes-Benz. I think at that time I was identified as bottom gay, the only thing I was done, another man did this to me.
Oh my God.
And all of these interesting concepts then started questioning. Then I okay, what does masculinity mean for me as a black man raised in the township who happens to be in spaces of opulence and a different class? Then I definitely there needs to be an interrogation of what it means to be a queer man. And obviously, being in spaces that have so much privilege, like being in a Eurocentric university, you get introduced to terms, introduced to a reality, and I realize, actually, I'm way past being a real Xhosa man, because my reality has connotations of realities that are way beyond than what I was introduced to. So am I really a Xhosa man? Yes, by virtue of still being deeply located in my traditions
Culture,
and rituals and all of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that other Xhosa men see me as a real Xhosa man.
Even though
I have been to
you've
initiation.
been to initiation and you did all the right things.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. That's interesting.
And how does that make you feel? Right. The thing of, in terms of belonging to the Xhosa community, right? And you having ticked the boxes of how within that space your man or your masculinity or your credit as a man
I think it's
has been defined and analyzed and I guess journeyed with, right? You've ticked all the boxes. You've done everything that is expected of you, right? And yet you're still not accepted. How did that make you, or how did it make you feel, or how did you reconcile that feeling? Because you spoke about belonging as part of, you going entabeni, and now that you've gone entabeni, but do you belong?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, KB. I remember even post entabeni, I would avoid gatherings with other amadoda, basically as a makwala. Because I didn't know how I would click. Because one, the language that they speak is very heterosexual, and at that time they're now starting to question, even though I didn't have the language for it. But also I was avoiding politics that come with this masculinity and having to prove. So then I automatically excluded myself, and at least at that time there was little time between Pumentabeni, it was December, January already, busy with schoolwork and getting ready for university.
Yeah.
So I got exempted from those whole difficult politics and I was always known as this boy who loves school.
Yeah.
And obviously school was my overcompensation, because anything that is boyish, I didn't do it. No soccer, no 3 girlfriends. Nothing to talk about really.
Sports.
Sports, no. Okay. I have never been a sports person to this day. Okay. So I was always known as the nerd. And so there were some exceptions done, like, we know Anele to be Tandi Ncwadi and all of that. But later in adult life, it really didn't matter, because I then got exposed to a multiplicity of different definitions of manhood.
Okay.
So being a Xhosa man in Joburg is insignificant. Right?
Tell me more about that. Wait.
I mean, Sutu, right? Tswana.
Yeah.
Sutu, right. Now, we are all 3 men.
Yeah.
Our marker of masculinity, we have different definitions of it.
Yes.
And to talk about our dicks is the least of the things we can talk about, really.
Yeah. No, that's true.
When you get told that you are a man because of your power, control, money, and everything else. So does it really matter?
Yeah.
Unless you find a group of Xhosa men in Joburg. But even so, a Xhosa man who went to St. John's and Hilton.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It was a killer school. Let's talk about something different. So the reconciliation for me has been really, it's insignificant to be asking myself that question, because it really doesn't make me feel some type of way. And again, the most important thing at the moment that I've been thinking about, my social capital has been my saving grace.
Okay.
Anele, who happens to be on TV, Anele, who happens to have money. So my queerness and my masculinity is the least that we can talk about. But we can talk about your influence and how influential you are in certain spaces. So I guess being in Joburg was the greatest saving grace. And actually realizing my circumcised dick doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't matter. Okay.
There's more that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least socially, right? Like in order for you to survive in social circles broadly. So the question I was going to ask is, how do you navigate the circles of amahwala now when you're in those circles now? Because I would assume there's still instances where, especially as a spiritual healer as well, where you are confronted with being around just men who have been to the mountain and who have a certain language and a certain way of doing things, and yet you're expected to be in that circle to discuss maybe like into zasendlini, aselalini. How do you manage that kind of thing?
Because it's not important for me. I've not really engaged with that. Also, where am I in my life? I get exempted on a lot of things, right? In my family, by virtue of my social capital, I think it's the by the way, Anele is gay. Because Pocket speaks, I always joke with them and I tell them I'm probably the only one that has the highest tax bracket in this family with an NQF level 9.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't matter. And literally I have no exposure to having to be part of those discussions. Elalili, probably I'm not gonna go to the crowd to slaughter goats and sheep. I can observe. But it's really nothing. And even for themselves, like I tell pads. Because I've always been Shema, I've always been soft, Mina. So even at home, there is nothing that is manly. I remember it being a responsibility given to me. But planning, paying for it, even now, interestingly, in my queer relationship, my partner, Juju, is the most handy person. For me, I like, babe, we can pay for this. I've got a tire best. Let's call road assistance. We have a geyser problem or a cupboard problem, but let's call someone. So,
Okay. I want to shift a little bit to so the psychology part. I want to come back to. I'm more interested at the moment in your kind of the spirituality part, and my understanding that in
the context of my case, I'm the one who's been given all the privileges and rights to carry the lineage in the family.
In your family.
Yes.
Okay. So part of your role is to then pass this down to everybody else who is also called up. There's that, right?
I see where you're going. Right.
So with that role, and given, because there I think social capital matters less.
Right.
Yeah. It's more about. It's almost like in the typical parlance, it's like, okay, lo mkhulu, tina singama, like others ngama twasana, ngama twasa wara. But if it's in the family, you're dealing with family members, like you're dealing with people who have the same blood as you, that have to listen to you, because this thing won't get passed down to them unless they take it through you effectively. How have you found that relationship? And how do you navigate it?
I love my ancestors. They are very intersectional in their view.
Okay.
Like, one, when I look at my family and I look at who possibly could have accepted this, and look at them like, ethics in this family don't exist. Sense of taking accountability. And the response and the responsibility that comes with this, I look at all of them, even those who have tried,
it's not happening.
But I think from that end, Ukoko that gave me the gift understands me very well, and made it very clear I don't want anything out of you to change. So the day I got to understand that my ancestors have nothing to do with my sexuality, because they understand the task is bigger than a part of who am I as a person, rather than the bigger task that they've given me. And it has never even dawned in my head that I wonder how do my ancestors think about me being gay. It's not even a question
That's
of
not a
that.
question. Okay.
For them, they see their child who is willing and has shown commitment to this, that is the least of the discussions that are part of it. But obviously, because this thing has to do with lineage, I always say, Kabelo, there's only one Imago Day in my life. That's me, who's the image of God. So I don't need to multiply my images.
Okay.
That's wild. I don't have the desire to live an image that looks like me to take on the generation. Always, if it's a family thing, it can be my nephew.
Yes.
It can be anyone.
Yes.
And that's it.
Okay.
But my ancestors have got no issue with me. If I want to have a child, I can have it the non-heterosexual way.
Okay.
And have a child
pass it
because I
down.
want to.
Right.
But also, I understand that my child may not possibly want this, or may not even be the chosen one.
Yeah.
But from a legacy perspective, I've done enough legacy that Anele would be known for being Anele.
Yes.
I don't see how little junior Anele, whether it's a girl or a boy, is going to make an impact. He could turn out to be the worst horrible person on this earth.
That's true. That's true.
Right? So my gift will continue beyond generations. Within my lineage, I don't have to produce. In any case, I've got issues with production. I can't even afford my life.
How am I
It's
gonna?
very expensive. Now another human being.
Yeah.
And with
Share
the
my
responsibility
expense.
of thinking that, if I take my child to Hilton, chances are you're like, Dad, what you do is really not within my life.
No, but so interesting enough for me, it's what I'm wanting to figure out now, right, is there's been a process and journey of accepting and unlearning and learning new things, right? Was it easy for you to make this transition, right? And if it wasn't, what are the things that you had to digest and journey through? What were the moments where this calling became heavy, right? Or it was tough to accept the calling itself? What were the moments where, it would be easier to just be a heterosexual psychologist because no one is going to ask any questions. You can just do your work and just move on. But now you have this complexity or the intersectionality rather of these three worlds that are not even forcing, that have become one in you, right? It looks easy now because we see it as a full package.
Right.
But I think getting here had its own challenges. And what were those and how did you manage or navigate that?
Certainly, it's a very hard thing to do. But I always say thank God to my academic capital, because I then had the language to name these things. And the day I found intersectionality, like, oh, okay, this is how these things connect and intertwine with each other. And I've seen them or kind of conceptualize them as a true gift. My colleagues ask me, how do you do psychology the way we do it and still give yourself permission to step out of the norm? Obviously, you need to be delinquent. Delinquent in a way that you have to problematize things. And there's a cost to it. I mean, you're doing something that others are doing it this way, and when you're choosing to do it the other way, even with spirituality. And maybe my background in theology, the Christian Eurocentric theology, and being a Methodist. Studied it for second year, I'm like, no, this Jesus way is not going to work for me. Did it, and I'm like, okay, good. The only thing I can get is a certificate, not beyond. So there's that. So there's been interesting thing. There was a point where I was, Mxnzplain, guys. And at that time, I wanted to somewhat, gay, or anything to change your life. Like, I wanted anything close to purity, and Christianity was that. Until I realized, hey, this Jesus way is not working for me. So my theological background has really helped me on oscillating between these two worlds and understanding that actually this is a part of who am I from an African perspective. So, and unfortunately with Ingulo being gifted, there came a point where it was beyond my reasoning and trying to find justifications. But if I don't do this, I could see my life going down the drain, like
Different path, yeah.
a different path. Like there was a point where I was doing so well, and there came a time, and last year was the worst. I'm like, there can't be anything beyond me that I may need to do than to fully give myself and attention to that. And obviously, there's some sense of guilt that comes with it, and some sense of resentment that comes with the calling, because there's no negotiation of autonomy, no negotiation of choice, no negotiation of your independence. So immediately vuma itongo, or allowing yourself to be in the journey, it means you allow spirit to take control, and control for me was the biggest thing. So even etongweni, it's not the easiest of situations, because it's painful to see your negotiations of ego death with what used to resonate with you. I mean, Christianity has some of its burdens here and there,
but it's not as, no?
It's not as ukwenza umsebenzi wabantu abadala is taxing emotionally, physically, and financially. It's so easy. Some days I felt more resentment than appreciation of the process, because I miss myself. So my life as a healer, even in there is nothing in there for you. It's a life of service. So you are forever in service, and like, Maragogo, what is in there for me? Right?
So it's a total letting go of your ego. Yeah?
Yeah, and this,
self,
I've never been as committed as I am to my own therapy this year.
Okay.
Because I saw how I was so consumed into this that I have nothing else to hold on to.
Consumed into what?
In the life of being a healer.
Okay.
Because now it's full time.
Yeah.
There's no negotiation. I mean, I haven't had sex for the past 8 months.
Right.
And I love that.
I assume you're saying you love that you have not had sex for 8 months.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
No, I don't like to.
PG.
My life, like you see, my reflections, maybe, I have nothing else except for that. And that's how it should be. But there are days I become rebellious, like I just want my life. But now I just have to find a way of negotiate. And obviously here and there, Abagogo, they know I love soft life.
Yeah.
Pour in
Look out for
a bit of soft of life. I still drive BMW.
Yeah.
I still live in Northcliffe. Like, oh shit, no.
It's all right.
It's all right. You're right.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult life to negotiate these two worlds, KB.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes from a place of conviction, I can't undo my faith and my reality as a Christian. But there are some parts where you can't have two altars in your same space. Yeah. So I do dabble here and there on my Christian spiritual practices, prayer, reading, but it feels awkward sometimes, like, hey, Mara, there's no Trinity in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we don't need Jesus here. So to always oscillate between those two worlds, it's very interesting. Similarly to psychology, like now as an initiate, I have to be committed into being, I'm an initiate,
Yes.
but at the same time I have to show up in a psychological way for my clients.
Yes.
And so I realized this year I've actually lost a lot of clients than ever before.
Because,
these beats are obvious.
Yeah. Also, because you're not hiding the fact that
I'm
you're
not hiding the
initiate.
fact that I'm an initiate.
Yeah.
And some days I will dress like one and
Yeah.
go to the practice room and I realize, hey, Anele, you are hectic.
Part of the
You
process.
stretched it too.
Yeah.
People appreciate the fact that that's what you do, but sometimes you don't want to see it. And this year, it has been very intense. That I have to respect the integrity that comes with being an initiate. At the same time, my bread and butter requires me to be a modern, typical psychologist.
Yeah.
You can't come to the office bending off in Pepper. Like, Pepper is my daily life. My office smells in Pepper.
Yeah.
Now I have to have diffusers. It's a constant everyday.
So you have to be
struggle.
palatable.
Yes.
Constantly.
Constantly.
Yeah.
You have to look like a psychologist. And some days I realize that, hey, people are okay with not knowing. I mean, they know most of them I'm queer, and it's never an issue because it's an invisible part of self that does not influence the way of how we think and we do therapy. However, if you're a healer,
but your spiritual standing is problematic.
It's problematic because some patients feel like, when are you really a psychologist and when are you Mkhulu or a gogo?
Yeah,
sure.
Don't you find that ironic though? Because in no other culture in South Africa do people question other people's quote unquote religious standing versus their profession. So for instance, no one ever says to a rabbi, oh, because you're a Jewish rabbi, I can't be, and now I'm a Christian, I can't be in business with you. Or hey, because you are you're Muslim, and I'm Christian, or I'm Mkhulu, I can't go into business with you. But I found, at least in the examples I've seen and heard, the minute it's switched, you as an African guy, you have your African religious practices, because that's actually what they are. That almost pulls people away from being able to relate with you with other things. Like, why is that?
And before you jump into that, right? Like as you were chatting, I realized there's so all my psychologists have always been Muslim, right? And for me, it was done specifically to avoid Christians, right? Because I found that immediately they find out I'm a priest, there's a need to constantly speak about God and Jesus in the actual sessions.
Sure.
Whereas if I am with a Muslim psychologist, they're not going to be there trying to show me that they understand the Bible. They're there to give the service and do the work that they need to do without infiltrating or trying to remind me, we're part of the same team. And is that something that you think has an impact or an influence in the work that you do? Well, on top of what Lebo just highlighted now.
I like what Lebo raised, and this is where the construct of dirty work came from. Because I problematized the normative, clean picture. Obviously, when I used to practice in Sentin, I was within the realms of, I understand I'm in Sentin, obviously. Class plays a huge factor, partnered with big brands, so you have to be compliant in that regard. But where I I can rather lose it. Like, I've lost significant amount of business and potential partnerships. I remember last year, one of the grooming products brands said, we love his work that he does on men and masculinity and how critical he is. But we are worried of his social media page because there it's so evident that I am very deep in African spirituality and its practices, and obviously the deal fell off because the brand felt I would perturb their audience. And when I look at the brand, it's predominantly the other group. And I'm like, okay, fine. And then another gig, they're like, oh no, we're happy, but the client is worried about your visible beads and what it would do to the image of the brand. Oh, okay, pass. But now I realize that in practice this year particularly, actually it's become so evident you are for the people that need you. So like Katie said, I have clients, either they have dreamt of me, they are sent by their guides to come and see me, or there's something
but sent to your psychology practice.
Yes.
But as opposed to Ndumbe.
And then again, I have been clear and intentional to locate my practice as an African psychologist. So automatically I know now I have a group that I service, a population that resonates with me. And it's predominantly millennials, people like you guys, cheesy guys, right? Who are
cheesy guys.
I don't know. I didn't hear that.
I'm lactose intolerant.
Awakening process, trying to find who they are. And all of that. So I've crafted my own niche area which speaks to that. And now I don't have issues of having to be worried about what my clients think.
Yeah.
The kind of clients that come to see me, they don't mind seeing it in the office. They don't mind in Pepo.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes you get to realize, hey, today it's gonna go other way around. So you quickly draw into being very clinical. And I realize actually I don't need this sense of overcompensation to prove and for people to resonate with what they may not ideally resonate with. So it's very clear, it's out there in the public. So anytime a client comes to my office, chances are they've done their research.
Yeah.
Okay.
For those who get surprised and they will be like, you came highly recommended, but I wonder if you being a healer isn't going to construe your objectivity. And I'm like, how does highly recommended and the confrontation of what you're seeing makes you question my objectivity?
Yeah.
So I think maybe in there, the overt representation of African spirituality embodiments
It's threatening.
in fact, it perturbs the space. However, if you go to a traditional healer who's a traditional healer, you won't be asking those questions. I think with me also, it surprises. Like, you speak the vocabulary, you look like the vocabulary, and all the semantics are there. It is only because you've got these beads that then perturb the idea and constructions of what a typical psychologist looks like.
But is that not in itself misconstrued by people too? Because what it does is it limits, quote unquote, the space in which African spirituality should play. Because what they're saying is, if I listen to you correctly, what they're saying is, if we were in this environment where I'm expecting to encounter umuntu who's an African spiritualist, it would be fine.
They would digest
But
it
because
better,
we are in Santon, in a fancy office, for instance, a scientific space, I'm not expecting, and I'm encountering a psychologist who comes highly recommended, but with beads. This thing can't be right.
Yeah, it becomes
That's limiting of the spirituality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no one else's spirituality is
KB
limited
mentioned
like
that now. Chances are, if you're gonna see a Muslim female therapist, what do they wear? KB, we will only probably see the eyes.
The veil,
Yeah. Now, how is that problematized?
Yeah.
How is a rabbi wearing that hat not questionable?
Yeah. No, that's exactly why I'm asking.
I've got my colleagues who on their website have made it clear that I'm a Christian psychologist. But me who's singing young, then there's a problem. So I think reconciliations with people come with we've seen him working with big names.
Yes.
And he comes highly recommended, and you'll hear some condescending statement. I didn't know you as good as I experienced you.
Sure.
That's true.
Ideally, Isangoma is not smart, primitive,
It's not
and
scientific.
dirty. They'll come to your office like, as much as it smells pepper, it looks modern African.
Looks good.
Right?
Yeah.
So there are these notions of rejection and acceptance here and there, but it's only when it's visible that it becomes a problem. But when they know Anele is a traditional healer, the office looks super clean.
It's exactly what it needs to be.
And I'm dressed to the occasion, like Kevin knows I can dress. Then there are no questions.
So to wrap up, what would you say to that young man or that boy, right, Eilaleni in the township who's navigating a very complex identity and is highly gifted, right? Like in a very short, pointed way, like what would your words be to that individual right now?
One, it would definitely be working hard on giving them the language that helps them to navigate all of these subjective oscillations that then come. One, they probably don't even know the word gay. They don't know the word queer. They don't have the capitals I possess that help me to draw either from Western psychology, Western theology, and all of these things. So, I've got a reference of the other as opposed to this. And because of that, and the education I have possessed, I've been able to work around that. But I think more work needs to be done around empowering young boys and men who see the world from a very interesting and different perspective and think our technology and what we have now. But when I look at a young boy who's different in the lallies, they know nothing else except striving for belonging. So they will do everything that looks like that which is a prescription and compulsory in that. But for them to choose an alternative, chances are they would have had to stay in the system and probably say, I'm either going to go to UJ or any university outside what they know and then start them to live their life. But within or during the time of negotiating those developments, it's hard. But I think, KB and you, we need to rethink and help young boys to rethink various possibilities of what manhood is and what masculinity is. Because at the moment, we have compulsory heteronormativity dictating that this is the only way. And in fact, the only way will only be the only way that will help you to sustain and survive the system. I do not see it possible for this young man who's negotiating all of these complex identities, finding a way of being anything else outside what they know. So I think more empowerment, more education, and more mentoring these young boys and just affirming them of they're good enough. And I mean, anytime we see a boy who is not the typical boy, there is a sense where this young boy must be this, and they're going to experience a lot of rejection that then comes with them being the way they are. Yeah.
Sure. I think I'm going to land it there. And more than anything else, Anele, I think I'd like to really say thank you so much for availing yourself to chat to us. And I think you've given us a lot of things. And I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, okay, we need to invite you to have a further conversation on African spirituality specifically, and how it just sometimes causes a bit of conflict within spaces. But I think that's a conversation for another day. But I think for me, the one thing that stood out the most in all that you said was just that consistency of allowing the spirit and to allow God to take control, right? But also understanding that at some point in the journey of becoming a man or becoming yourself, your ego has to die. And I think that's something that a lot of us are still learning to do, right? Is how to allow the ego to die and be open to, I guess, to the universe, to God, to the spirit, and allow that purpose to continue to show up even when the world says it's impossible. So to just keep going. But I think even for you, we pray and hope that you will continue working hard and being consistent. And we love the work that you do.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
don't step back. Keep working, keep moving.
Yeah. Look, I'm deeply grateful for this conversation. A bunch of things you've said, which I think are incredibly important and will actually help us grow this show and its viewership. Where I want to give you some words of encouragement based on the brand thing that you mentioned. I'm always struck how short-sighted some of these brands are. You know, the people you serve in your psychology practice and are the majority of the country anyway. So if they pull away from you, they're essentially saying they want to pull away from their markets, from their real market. Like the real people who buy the products. So my words of encouragement is where Nkulunkulu would never send you to a path that doesn't ultimately bring his name higher and bring his people closer to him. Which means when you'll be fine, you'll be taken care of. So the question I have for you now is, because of the different worlds that you play in, so you've got the psychology in European context, whatever, and then you've got your spiritual walk as right? Have you ever had an instance where people come to you for the one? Let's assume the psychology right now, right, is to help, but the answer or part of the answer actually came from spirituality?
Oh, that's a very interesting part I'm enjoying about my career at the moment.
Okay.
And this is where the idea of decolonizing psychology has given us fertile ground of engaging with questions of that nature. Thanks to people like Professor Kopano Ratele. He writes a book, The World Looks Like This From Here, and speaks about the importance of Africanizing psychology and really looking at psychology from an African perspective. Balois, Augustine Noyes, there's quite a lot of them that have helped us to theorize about how we think about psychology in Africa, particularly about South African psychology in South Africa. Now, this is Anele working in South Africa, who is a healer. Obviously, I can never divorce my beingness into the profession. Like anyone is welcome to do so. Now, where it is important, I have also worked hard on normalizing the kind of psychology that I do. There are a lot of psychologists who are healers, KB, one of good friends, and many others who are, but they are not as loud as I am because of the cost that is around it. Right? You are likely to lose business. It's costly to do the work that I do because it's unscientific, unethical, and all of these things that you can think of. Now, I have decided to do my doctorate in how this two world works. So I am trying to also bring scientific legitimacy to the work that I do. So I'm looking at the role of indigenous healers, particularly Amagricha, in the provision of mental health care services in South Africa. The first contact of people that you go and see is Lalin. Or in the township, you have a psychotic episode, you are taken to a Glichin. So there are some knowledges and things that we can take from that. So that's one way of looking at it, looking at bringing scientific legitimacy to the work. But how it happens in the room, this is where it is interesting. If a client automatically tells me, I am sent to you, I've got two choices to make from an ethical perspective. Utunyiwe, right? At least I do everything a psychologist will do, a clinical assessment, everything else that is needed. Then I ask the client, what do you want? We've had intake, and out of this intake, I can see this is how much of this has to do with the Tongo. This is how much of it is scientific. We've got all the clinical evidence that is suggestive of any psychological disorder. Where do you want to go with this? It then becomes the client that chooses where they want to go with it. Then I say, once you choose this path, it means I won't then be able to see you clinically. And in my house...
So you don't mix the two.
So you have to separate the two worlds.
However, it's interesting to separate the two worlds in the room because there are times where I can see there is nothing psychological here. I happen to have been a link that looks familiar with this person, and they come... Actually, even how they phrase the presenting problem. It's, you listen to it, but you look at the intervention and you're like, if I tap into the spirit, and then I automatically know sometimes, Lebo comes into my office and there's bapping happening and I knew already, it's not going to be clinical, this one. Then Lebo says, can I sit on the floor? Can I take off my shoes? Can I have hands? Then I know there's a particular trajectory that the client is pushing me to. But I still remain and say, fine, I'll remain in my chair and you sit on the floor and I will have my pen and paper and do my psychological work. Then at the end of the day, and out of the session, then I ask, what do you want? Then you tell me. So there's no way I can silence Itongo in the room. And sometimes when a client finishes, I already know what's going on. But automatically, and obviously, that takes away business from me. What could have been an intervention for 6 sessions? In one session, someone is getting the answer.
Does it happen with white clients?
No, I don't even see them.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
I'm not the representation that draws them.
Okay.
I'm too dirty for that kind of work, right?
Well, according to them.
According to them. So
Okay.
I suppose even so, the matter of them, it's a matter of resonance. Client therapeutic resonance. At some point, it really sat with me, KB, like, how come the other race doesn't see me as worthy as a psychologist? But I'm very honest, and it's a reality of where we are from a racial perspective, from a cultural relatability perspective, and all of that. But it's very hard coming to your point to navigate these two worlds where you can see where a client is pushing you to. Or already in the second or third session, and now they say, hey, I actually have a matter I want to discuss with you on the other side. Like, remember, ethically, we can't mix
Not
the
here.
two.
Okay.
Right. So, interestingly, there's a client I had to go with, Emanzini Izol. And this guy made it clear that I am happy that we terminate our therapeutic relationship and stick to you being my spiritual mentor.
Sure. Okay.
Like, hey, obviously, you're thinking, but we already have a therapeutic relationship. No, I give you the consent as a client to terminate that part. But we can take parts of it and domain
Bring it into here.
and bring it into the space.
Sure.
That's tough.
And how he then deems me as an elder who has the capacity to take him through his spiritual journey, but feels that we have concluded the psychological aspects, even though we can still take some parts of it and do it.
Sure.
It's very interesting.
So I separate my role. I've got a Indumba on the side, and it is a different gate, and I've got the professional side. But you have patients, when they come and say, you came highly recommended, this word is a big thing. You came highly recommended. I love your intersectional view of how you see psychology and spirituality, and not just spirituality, but African spirituality. But how I will be able to dabble between the two worlds into one session.
Dabble.
Oh, that's very nice. But you are aware that I'm a clinical psychologist, right? Say, yes, but we love that part. So that part has become the biggest capital of my profession. So I know I serve people who are looking for that. So I don't worry about my market. I already know what it is. So when Mxnzplain comes into my office, like, I've literally done a good job for Mxnzplain to come here because I came highly recommended.
Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you for
this is
listening, guys.
Mxnzplain. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for being with us. My name is Lebo
And I'm Kabelo Mutlakane. And thank you for being with us here on Mxnzplain.
Sabonga.
Thank you.